Welcome to another episode of Axe of the Blood God, an independent RPG podcast. I am your host, Kat Bailey. Joining me, as always, my lovely co-host, Nadia Oxford.
Hello, Kat. Did you know that big bird almost went up in the Challenger?
Yes, I do. I told you that fact, Nadia.
No.
That was my pit.
I knew it all along.
Can't bring the pre-show into the main show every time.
No, the pre-show's leaking into the main show.
It's all contaminated. Sorry,
The
everyone.
pre-show was in the Challenger.
No.
It's coming down a shower of feathers. Yellow feathers.
Also joining me, my equally lovely co-host, Eric Van Allen.
I can't follow that up with anything. There's nothing you could follow up. Big Bird was almost in the Challenger. There's nothing. Hi, good morning.
Speaking of showers of feathers, we're talking about Monster Hunter Wilds this week. We're going to be reviewing it. That's why we're doing the recording on Monday. We had to wait for the embargo. We have plenty of thoughts, including talking about, is this one too easy? Question mark. Is it the best Monster Hunter yet? Let's talk more about it coming up real soon. And later on in the episode, we will be looking back on Axe of the Blood God's 10th anniversary, talking about the Final Fantasy Magic the Gathering reveals, and wondering what the heck is up with NetEase and how may it impact some of the RPG developers under its umbrella. We'll get to all of that in just a moment, but first, if you enjoy the show, please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/bloodgodpod, where for just $5 a month, you get the show ad-free, you get access to lots of bonus episodes, you get access to our Discord, and there are other perks as well, including access to our premium version of our newsletter, which goes out every single Thursday, featuring the original comic stylings of one Nadia Oxford. We're also doing... That's you. We're also doing a monthly game club right now for the Pantheon of the Blood Guys Cyberpunk 2077. And I believe that we have chosen our next side quest topic, which is coming up next week. We are going to be celebrating the 25th anniversary of the release of the PlayStation 2 with a PS2 draft. Mm-hmm. Wow. We're all getting together and we're creating our ultimate RPG library for the PlayStation 2. What will be the first overall pick? I'm putting my money on Final Fantasy X. There are a lot of better RPGs on that system.
Dragon Quest 8.
Eric making faces.
Eric's making disapproving faces.
Look, believe what you want. There's more points for me in the end.
Gosh, there's a lot of PSAs to get through. This is the 499th episode of Axe of the Blood God. Next week is the 500th episode of Axe of the Blood God, in which we all share the best RPGs to come out in the past 10 years since the release of Axe of the Blood God, en route to creating the ultimate top 10 list. Make sure to come over. It's going to be a party. And by the way, there's new merch on shop.bloodgodpod.com.
Clothe your naked body with us.
But right now it's exclusive to the Stars of Destiny, who get access to it early on and also for 20% off. And Eric, can we show some of that cool merch?
I have word coming in that we are going live with new merch.
New merch?
And it is visible. It is visible. We can see it on the screen right now. Viewers at home.
What are we looking at right now?
We're looking at the shirt. We're looking at a shirt right now.
Looking at the shirt. This is artwork by Nina Matsumoto, who is amazing and rendered us all in the classic JRPG style. The classic Final Fantasy IV Japan box art style. Nadia's looking amazing as a dragoon. I'm in Minnesota Vikings colors for some reason. She was actually like
dragon's blood.
Eric has Poe.
I'm a beast master.
Little beast master, and Victor is a blue mage. We got a lot of different variants of this one as well. We also got a cool mug. The brand new mug featuring this artwork. We've got a zip hoodie. We've got totes. We've got lots of stuff, desktop mats, but it's only available to the Stars of Destiny right now. It'll be available wide for everybody when the 500th episode comes out next week. And finally, make sure to subscribe to the newsletter. You can do that over at blogoutpod.com, which comes out every Thursday. Phew. Okay, I think that's all of the housekeeping. Let's continue on to our review of Monster Hunter Wilds, the latest game to come out in the midst of this giant blunderbuss of RPGs in February 2025. It is not out yet. It'll be out February 28th. It's currently an 89 on Metacritic. Eric has been playing it. I've been playing it. Eric, I believe, rolled credits. I am like halfway through.
One monster away from rolled credits.
One monster away.
Yeah. I gotta
Nadia,
go punch that last guy.
Have you been playing, Nadia?
I did not get a code.
You did not get a code.
I did not get
You'll
a code.
get a code soon, I hope, because we're gonna be. Maybe next Monday we can do Mon Hunt. We can do a Mon Hunt Monday hunt. Our first Mon Hunt Monday.
We have to do Mon Hunt Mondays. We have committed to
I
Mon
gotta
Hunt
get
Mondays.
lost.
Yeah.
You guys are ahead of me, so I gotta do a montage.
Oh, we can run you through some monsters.
Gotta
Oh,
do
absolutely.
Run you through
Yeah.
some monsters. Yeah.
Even after the montage.
So 89 on Metacritic. A lot of discussion about it. A lot of talk about, is this actually a pretty easy Monster Hunter? Eric, you've played a lot of it. What are your thoughts? Is this easier than normal?
So, for background, because I think this is important, Monster Hunter, I've played various versions of Monster Hunter. I think I've probably spent the most time with Monster Hunter 4U was the 3DS one, I believe. And then Monster Hunter, I spent some time in World, some time in Rise, but I never really got super deep into any of them in the modern era. This is probably the most time I've spent with Monster Hunter in over a decade. And I have to say this up front, I do really like this game. I am really enjoying this game. However, as in Finding Nemo, here comes the but. I do kind of sync up with, as you can see on the stream right now, the IGN review thoughts. I read Tom Marks's take already, and some other thoughts that were out there that were kind of saying this one's a little bit easier than I think I was expecting. I think it's important to say what we mean when we say easy, because there are different difficulty ranks of hunts in Monster Hunter, right? And I think once you get up into the higher levels, from what I've heard from people who've played higher into the more aggressive monsters and stuff, it does get a little bit more challenging. But I think the main campaign, what you would say the run to the first credits, not only was it pretty straightforward and not too friction filled, but it was also very on rails. You were kind of being constantly pushed from point to point to point, almost to the point where it felt like there weren't really breaks to sit down and be like, oh, I'm going to go explore the world a little bit. I'm going to go maybe hunt that monster again, 2 or 3 more times to get the armor parts that I want to maybe finish this set out. It's really urgent in a sense that the game wants you to just finish that campaign. That it really does feel like the game just wants you to finish the main story quest and see your first credits roll as soon as possible, because that's really where it starts to open up and add more for you to do and get into what people would say are the real meat and potatoes of Monster Hunter. And so I think that's a good thing. And I also think that's going to be a challenging thing for both returning players to have to deal with the idea that they have to go through some stuff that feels pretty bog standard, pretty basic. But also, I think even for newer players, they're going to have to get through the opening, so to speak. And I wonder how the newcomers are going to respond to this.
So I've been playing Monster Hunter since Worlds, so I didn't realize that you've been playing Monster Hunter longer than I have, Eric. I
didn't play much Worlds Arise, so you probably have more hour count than I have.
That's so interesting that you didn't play much of Worlds Arise. I put a good 200 hours into both, actually. And Wilds is much closer to Worlds than it is to Rise. Rise feels very video gamey in its own way. Nadia, you played Rise, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're right about that. Rise really kind of felt like it was a zone-based game where you kind of like had a hub and then you went to one place then the other. It was very quick. It almost sounds like Capcom's always trying to find that secret sauce to bring more and more Monster Hunter players on, and they got to find
Yeah.
that balance between newbies and, as you say, Eric, kind of making the oldsters go through the, Kokiri Village tutorial, if you want to call it that. But I can understand why, because we were talking about this in the pre-show. A lot of casual Monster Hunter players never get to those meat and potatoes. They kind of drop off after the hunt, whether because they just get tired of it or they just kind of forget to come back to it. And for the longest time, Monster Hunter has always been like not just the campaign, but holy crap, here comes a new monster. Go hunt it. Like that's the way the game works, basically. So yeah, I can see why they would kind of trim down the campaign. And as someone who is much more Monster Hunter casual than you guys, like I've said before, I love Monster Hunter stories. I'm like, yay, let's ride Rathalos. Not so much let's kill one. But I am curious to see where this goes. I felt like Rise had a smoother entry point than World, but there still was some friction. So yeah, I'm curious.
I think the biggest difference between Wilds and Worlds and Rise is that Wilds is much more seamless and interconnected. They
Right.
try and put the base camp directly in the wilds, so to speak, and they take away a lot of the kind of individual moment-to-moment processes. For example, you're not going and you're prepping for your hunt and you're eating at the cat area as much anymore. You're more likely to just hop onto your your chocobo and go riding out. I need to come up with a name for my chocobo. I haven't thought of one yet.
Fuzzy.
Oh,
Big
Go
bird.
riding out into the wilds to hunt things. Capcom does a really masterful job of making its environments feel alive, which I think is one of the biggest and most compelling things about Monster Hunter. And Wilds is more so than ever. I love that they have these huge packs of monsters roaming the wilderness, and that sometimes those monsters can end up fighting one another. It can get really chaotic. Sometimes you have to drive them off. They were kind of showing that off in the network test with the Doshiguma, for example.
Yeah, I did do that. I did the network test.
This is by far the easiest time I've had with Monster Hunter. I struggled through Monster Hunter Worlds. I was playing as a longsword user, which is, in fairness, like kind of an advanced weapon, and you have to really abuse invincibility frames and whatnot. Monster Hunter Wilds, I've been playing as the Gunlance, and I was been thinking, do I just really vibe with Gunlance? Maybe I just was meant to be playing almost a sword, and maybe I was just always meant to play a more defensive tanky class in this game. But also, you can really abuse wounds in this game. There's this mechanic called wounds where you're covering the monsters with these red angry wounds that you can target and do just horrendous amounts of damage. And more than that, when you hit those wounds, you stagger them. And so it's possible to just knock a monster silly while doing huge amounts of damage. And whereas a hunt would take like 45 minutes to an hour previously, they now take about 15 minutes. But it walks the line of maybe trivializing it just a bit.
yeah, it's a really hard balance to strike, because I do see a lot of people who have never really gotten into Monster Hunter, seeing how streamlined this is. And I do think the streamlining is a good thing overall. There's still some parts of it that Monster Hunter is going to naturally be clunky with. The menus are still kind of finicky and take a lot of, like, you need someone who has played Monster Hunter to tell you, like, this is what you need to pay attention to in menus. This is what you need to check before you go on a hunt. Make sure you look at your food, make sure you've eaten and all that kind of stuff. Check your sharpness, check the whetstone. It helps to have someone to Sherpa you through some of that stuff. But
For sure.
I do think the game does a really good job of trying to get you to the good stuff as fast as it can. I do think the stuff that you play, there's some really great fights early on. Some of the newer monsters, the new Udra, which is the big cephalopod, is a really great fight. There's another one, the Jin Dahad, which I'm not going
The
to get
first
into.
octopus.
Yeah, yeah. The Jin Dahad
Cool.
is like a Leviathan, and it feels like a Final Fantasy 14 raid. There's a section that I literally am not going to tell you what happens because it is so exciting when it does happen. But those who have played Final Fantasy 14 will geek out when it shows up, and I think that's all. It almost feels like a little homage to the crossover that Monster Hunter and Final Fantasy 14 have with the Rathalos mount. That it feels like there was some give and take there that worked really well, and that the Monster Hunter team played well with those ideas. So I love seeing that. I also love he's not a new guy, I'm pretty sure, but the monkey that throws poop, big fan of him.
Him.
He's
He
from Monster Hunter
farts.
2, I think.
Yeah, he
He's been
farts
around.
everywhere
Far back as that.
and stuff like that. Love
Yeah.
him. He's the best.
Doesn't he
Yeah,
fart on
cool.
you?
Yes, he farts on you, and you have to like roll in the water to bathe yourself to get unstinky, and I love everything about it. I think ultimately
There's a real good sense of humor to Monster Hunter. I'll talk about this in just a moment, but Monster Hunter does what EA wishes it were doing. EA wishes it were Monster Hunter. Anyway, continue, Eric.
Well, all I was going to say is that ultimately this is going to be a game that gets a lot of people into Monster Hunter, which is really exciting. I think there have been a lot of people that have wanted to try the series for a while, that are going to find a very easy onboard ramp here. And maybe that's where some of the tension comes from. That's where some of the friction comes from, is the idea that things have been kind of smoothed out a bit. But I think that's fine if you end up with a situation where people are getting into this series finally. And it's primed. Like Capcom's punching so high right now. It's riding off the coast of so many successful revitalizations of its franchises that the time seems right for everybody to get super Monster Hunter involved now. I'm just really curious to see what post-launch support looks like, because I think that will ultimately be what defines this game historically, is not what is here right now, but how Capcom continues to build on it. I think that's, in some ways, that's been the case for a while. I think Rise was very defined by its base set, the Palamute, the Wirebug, things like that. But Worlds was very much defined by how good Iceborne was. Even base Worlds was very good, but Iceborne was a pretty stellar update to that game.
Worlds had some great collaborations. The Final Fantasy 14 Behemoth mission was fire. It was really good. So
I hope to see more of that here, because I think if they build on it, then even some of the worries and concerns will be assuaged over time.
It doesn't seem like the roadmap is very robust going into summer. Maybe 2 monsters between now and then. I think a lot of people will be waiting for the real end game hunts, like the elder dragons, which is when Monster Hunter typically kind of shows its teeth, requires you to get some really high level builds going, and also tends to be its most spectacular in terms of presentation. And I think the Elder Dragons is what a lot of players really hunger to fight, I suppose.
See, I don't like fighting any of the flying enemies. Whenever the dragons fly, I'm like, that's cheating. Come down here. Let me hit you. I want to bonk you on the head with my hammer.
Ooh.
Yeah.
They don't all fly.
Well, yeah, but
some live in lava
enough
pits.
Some of them land and stuff like that. I think my favorite fights, like I said, the cephalopod was really good. The spider was really, really good. An early standout for me was that spider fight, especially the arena that you fight it in is really, really cool and interesting. I think they do some cool stuff with that. I do wish there was a little bit more weather stuff. I feel like the weather was not as much of a factor as I was led to believe it would be, and I'm hoping that as the fights get tougher, the weather plays more of a factor.
The fight against the Alpha Doshiguma weather is definitely a factor in that one. Mm-hmm. Almost getting struck by lightning and whatnot. I like the Ray Dao fight also. Typical dragon fight. It shoots you with lightning. It was in the network test. I had a good time
like a rail
fighting.
gun, right? It basically like just blasts. Yeah.
Oh my god.
One thing I
I'd
really
have a
like
real
about
time.
this one, Monster Hunter Rise and Worlds both had these gimmicky missions that you had to do in order to get materials. In World, you were kind of on the back of a giant monster, and you were shooting things with turrets and whatnot.
Yeah.
And it was very set piece oriented. Didn't like that. And then in Rise, you had these tower defense missions with tons of monsters stampeding in.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
again, turret missions. I'm gonna ban turret missions
I found it very
forever.
stressful. Not very. I think I ran in, but like caused a lot of friction for me. I wasn't a fan of those.
Wilds kind of mercifully does not have that, which is great because I
Right.
had literally zero desire to farm them. And I'll be real, I like that the story is only like 15 hours long, so you can get to kind of the meat of the game, which for me is playing with my friends and hunting. I'm hopeful that the grind isn't quite as intense, especially in Rise. Rise felt like a very intense grind to get the highest level gear to the point that it could get a little exhausting at times. And you had to do a lot of those dang stampede missions. Wasn't having a great time with those. But I think Monster Hunter Wilds has wisely taken into account a lot of the feedback. But I think what really makes this, the reason the story is not unbearable to me in the way that like a Pokemon story is unbearable to me, is that the monsters are fun to fight on a moment-to-moment basis, and this game really understands that people are here for the hunts. So there's like, here's a monster, here's a monster, here's a monster, just fight the monsters. And I'm like, yes, I will fight the monsters, thank you.
All right, I will.
And it surrounds you with these appealing, amusing, fun characters who aren't particularly deep, but are over just bursting with design sense and personality in the way that they move, interact with you. You almost fill in the gaps for Gemma, for example, your blacksmith lady, who every time you upgrade a weapon, it has this lovely little bespoke animation where she's putting on her goggles and she's working the furnace, and then here comes your weapon. So many games would just say, here's a weapon, you upgraded it.
Yeah.
I think Monster Hunter really goes the extra mile with those kinds of animations, and it stood out to me since World, honestly.
Yeah, it makes me miss some of so there's cooking in this game, but you don't have the palicos, the cats cooking for you, which I do miss. That was a little something.
They
that
were
I
so
enjoyed.
good. I could watch
Good
those
at it.
dang palico animations over and over again forever.
Yeah. And now more often you're just going to see your hunter with your palico hanging out with you, but like dropping some meat on a little like REI camping stove and cooking out in the wilds. Which the thing I do like about wilds is the path from being at base to going on a hunt to doing stuff to potentially going on more hunts while you're out to coming back to crafting feels so smooth in ways that original, older Monster Hunters I think struggled to create a good loop and create a good sense
agree.
of like circulation of what
Yeah.
you're doing and kind of pushing you forward. I felt like I always had something I was working towards, but also like I was never encountering as many frustrating like, oh, I'm getting dragged back to base now, and now I gotta like go into this. There's still some menuing, there's still some clunkiness in that way. I feel like some of that is inseparable from Monster Hunter to some degree, but I think this is the smoothest that experience has been for me in terms of just getting out there and doing the thing you want to be doing. So yeah, I definitely think this is the one that if you've been on the fence about Monster Hunter for a while, this is absolutely the game you should try. This is the one that will probably have the highest likelihood of getting you interested. I think a lot of the concerns do come from a place of people who have played these games before wondering A, whether it's going to hold your attention if you're new or old, and B, whether it's going to have the long-term support that could make this a real goat.
Oh, it will.
Yeah.
Yeah, Capcom will keep putting out stuff. I will see how much the base game gets, I would be a little worried about the base game tailing off. I'm sure there will be an expansion
Yeah, for sure.
similar to Iceborne and Sunbreak. It'll have master level hunts. It'll have new mechanics. It will be bigger and better and greater than ever. And that will be, to me, almost where the real game is. The real. Because in both of the case of Iceborne and Sunbreak, that's where the most compelling hunts are. The most the greatest presentation, the best and most enjoyable gear. It's geared toward high level players, so it's super fun to play with your friends. It's always kind of a bummer. I've now gone through 2 cycles of this. This is my 3rd cycle. It's like going through Pokemon generations. I've finally graduated from Pokemon to Monster Hunter. In Japan, the truism is that when you're little, you play Pokemon, and then when you're a teenager, you play Monster Hunter with your friends. And then when you're an adult, you go back to buying Pokemon lifestyle goods. But I now play Monster Hunter for the most part. I've been through 2 cycles. It's my 3rd cycle, and the bummer is that I will spend all this time grinding gear in Monster Hunter Wilds' base game, and then it'll all be obsolete just in time for whatever the expansion is for Monster Hunter Wild.
Yeah, I get that a lot with FF14. But it's the journey.
I mean, it's like an MMO kind of situation, right?
It is.
Definitely
It
is.
really is. Yeah.
From an RPG perspective, I'm going to reset the clock and ask, Monster Hunter an RPG?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Easy. Number go up.
Great. We can put it into the Pantheon then.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah. We can do that. Yeah.
Yay!
A+++.
Monster Hunter Wilds, Monster Hunter Worlds is eligible for the Pantheon.
Oh my god.
That is.
Now that's a Pantheon level experience.
Something to think about.
I do
Iceborne
think
was really, really special. It was so good.
I think the RPG stuff even ends up being something that I wish there was maybe a smidgen more of, because I was enjoying a lot of the moments where I got to make a really good choice about, oh, I'm using this equipment because it has this effect on it and it's going to change the way that I play, or it's going to change what I'm chasing after as a player. I had a hammer that could build up sleep over time. And so it felt really good to just get in and do a lot of quick jabs and small hits, because I knew that I could build up the sleep effect status and eventually put the monster to sleep and then get right in front of it and just wind up that big old whammy. Just big old bonk on the head.
Go to sleep forever.
Yeah. Night followed by night.
Capital N night.
Yeah. I wish there was a little bit more of that, because I feel like you don't even really start seeing the framework of that until you're near the end game, near the part where the game actually kicks in. And again, that's the thing with Monster Hunter, right? Is a lot of the main quest is just getting to that part where now you're going to start doing the stuff that Monster Hunter is all about. But I do enjoy that stuff. I think it works. I think Monster Hunter Wilds does it well. It takes time to get there. So that's, if you're starting new, I would encourage you to definitely like maybe squad up with people, but also like run some solo stuff and just get familiar with the weapons, try the weapons out. They give you a great training area to just try all the weapons and do whatever you want. And the fact that your Secret, the bird, I still like the Palamutes a little bit more, but the Secret lets you carry a second weapon, which can either be an alternate version of a weapon type that you're using. So like I could have 2 different hammers if I wanted, or you could have a different weapon entirely. So I was running around with the heavy bow gun on my Secret for when I ran into enemies where I just wanted to kind of pop away at them from a distance for a little bit and maybe work on building up some wounds or building up some special ammo, elemental damage and things like that to deal with specific enemies. And it was nice having that variety and being able to swap on the fly when I was out in the field.
Yeah, but you can also... And this was kind of the case with Rise as well. It felt like I could abuse the Secret a little bit. Because every time I was a little bit in danger or knocked down, I could summon my Secret pretty quickly and kite the monster while healing and fixing my weapon and everything. That's not a bad... And then you can jump off the Secret and potentially mount it. It's... a really great way to mount a monster. So it felt not overpowered, but really, I was abusing it a lot. Put it
It
that
reminds me
way.
of summoning Torrent in Elden Ring
Yes.
to get away from
Yes.
things. I did that a lot, to
Yeah.
be honest.
I mean, I love having the mount, and
Yeah.
I loved having mounts at Monster Hunter Rise. It was great. It was a great job of them to bring it back. I was
I
mentioning
am pro
earlier,
mount.
yeah, big pro mount. I miss the Palamutes, but having a Chocobo is cool too. So
Raptor Bow.
Yeah, there's a lot of elements from Rise that don't make a return. For example, you can't ride a monster around and have them
Oh yeah.
smack into another monster
No
and punch them in the
rodeo.
face for a while.
That was fun.
The wire bug stuff isn't in here this time around. You don't have this glowing endemic life that you're collecting like little power-up orbs before you go into an actual fight.
There's something close enough to it that I wasn't missing that much. There's some bugs that you can get that either give you the status effects in the moment. So like when you're in the cold area, you can get the ones that stave off the negative effects of cold for a little bit that you can just like chomp down on in real time. And also there's a lot of like catching and grabbing things as you're running around in your secret, because you can tell your secret to just autopilot to whatever your waypoint is, and then while you're doing that you can basically play Pokemon Snap with like grabbing different things that are around there and crafting and doing your whetstone sharpening and everything. You can do everything on the secret aside from cook. They don't let you cook while you're driving. But I didn't miss that stuff as much, though I know what you're talking about. I know, yeah, there's a different tone there for sure.
I think Monster Hunter is at its best when you feel like you're in an all-out, knockout, drag-out brawl with a monster where you're both desperately exchanging blows and lightning is crashing all around you, and it feels huge and imposing, but also vulnerable at the same time. It reacts to your blows. The actual fights have a story to them. Often the monsters will retreat to their nest at the end, and some of the bigger fights they'll have their own super special attack that they'll do once they are in their desperation state. And just no other game hits in the same way. I was saying earlier that EA wishes that it were Capcom in this regard. And the reason that it works is Capcom has a much more flexible technology platform than EA does in the RE engine. Though it's starting to show its age just a little bit with Monster Hunter Wild. Some of the open areas chug a bit. I think I was playing on PC, so it was doing fine on my rig. I was able to play at 60 FPS with most of the settings turned up high without too much trouble. I was playing on a 4070 Super. Flexible technology platform, really memorable characters, live service hooks, a perpetual and constant interest, and they're just a really strong brand at this point. You know Monster Hunter when you see it. You know Palicos. There's just a lot of fun to this series that tends to lack in a lot of other AAA live service franchises. It's all becoming a little calculated at this point, but you can still see a lot of the personality shining through with Monster Hunter, I think.
To that point, you can see where EA tried, granted through publishing, to make a Monster Hunter. It was Wild Hearts or something like that.
Yeah,
yeah.
Well, that was like Koei Tecmo.
Yeah, it was published,
and it got
under
shut down
EA,
like
if I
almost
remember
immediately.
right. Yeah, and that one wasn't even that bad. It had some ideas, but
No, it's all right.
I do think it is the heart and soul end up selling it a lot. The same thing we see with Pokemon and people who try to do Pokemon is they realize, oh, it's actually kind of hard to do that. I've been playing the Dynasty Warriors Hades alike, basically Warriors Abyss, and I kept telling somebody that game is really making me respect how elegant Hades is, like how well made Hades is for what it does, and how it like changed action roguelikes basically forever, but also how so many games that have tried to imitate it can't do exactly what it does so well. there is an elegance to Monster Hunter, even as I say that like some of the menus are still clunky and some of the other stuff is all that, but there is a clear vision for what this game is that has been realized year over year that just works. It just clicks, and it really does shine in those good moments. I think a lot of the new monster designs are really good too and really emphasize that as well. You get these great fights that feel like they're paced just right. I think some of them might drag on a little bit too much because of some of the difficulty we were talking about earlier, where eventually you get to a point where you know you're going to beat this monster up and it's probably not going to cart you anymore because you've beaten it up enough that's not going to throw its biggest attack at you anymore. Maybe like one or two desperations, but not anything that's too dangerous. And so I had a few times where fights were like, okay, I know I've beaten this monster already. Like let's cut to the end here. But for the most part, the conflicts, the battles are super well paced, really fun, really enjoyable. You're in, you're out. You come back, you make some sick armor. You can dress your palico up like an octopus.
Yay!
And it flows, and it's really hard for a lot of games to get that kind of flow going. But Monster Hunter Wilds is maybe the smoothest it's ever been, and it works really, really well.
Eric, you played as you're using hammer. That's your main weapon.
I bonk on the head.
Bonk bonk.
Yeah.
I'm gun lance. I'm poke, and sometimes I shoot little crash man bombs into monsters and watch them blow up.
Like it's like using a giant injector needle. Like that is kind of creepy.
Nadia, what are you gonna play with?
When I did the traffic test, I kind of played as daggers, and I forgot that you have that whole like devil rage thing. That's really fun. But I don't know. Eric mentioned the blowgun. Sorry, the heavy
bowgun. Yeah,
and I like the idea of sniping from a distance and then getting in with doing the whole red mage thing. Getting in.
I do think when we do Monster Hunter Mondays, I'll probably swap to a new weapon to start gearing it up. And I've been looking at a few of the ones that I almost went with, and the Charge Blade and the Switch Axe are both pretty tempting. I just like big
my
bonk.
friend Jada from IGN was playing with the Charge Blade, I think.
It's really interesting.
I played Charge Blade briefly in World, and that's a pretty fun weapon to use. Switch Axe I played a bunch in Rise, and I got a little sick of it. It got a little repetitive after a while, but Charge Blade would be a fun to revisit, I think.
It's hard to go wrong with Sword Shield, Longsword. Longsword is a classic for a reason. There, people who like the Longsword seem to really like the Longsword. Like they're just devoted Longsword mains.
It is really fun once you get the hang of it, and you can really. It is so satisfying to get the flow of the battle and just abuse monsters who literally cannot even touch you because you're going right through them with your longsword. It's a lot of fun. You feel like a samurai.
Yeah, you get to do a lot of the was it Odin in Final Fantasy 16 where you had all the slashes and like Virgil type stuff, basically, where you're just like slashing everywhere and sliding through people and stuff. It's
you get the little meter up to red, and then you're really starting to do some crazy damage with that thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing I like about Monster Hunter, is that there's a build up and a pacing to a lot of the different weapons. They all have unique and interesting mechanics. They all have their own sort of combos. There are core combos that you really want to learn so that you can build up the weapon's potential and then eventually get to the point where you're doing very large amounts of damage. And when you get to that point, which isn't always easy because obviously the monster is trying to do interrupts and everything, it's really, really satisfying. It does a great job of balancing the action portion of it, which almost has a fighting game component to it, and the RPG aspect of it, where you're maximizing your build, your stamina, the stuff that you're attaching to everything. Your builds really, really, really matter in Monster Hunter in terms of what you're trying to pull off, but equally there's a very strong skill aspect to this game as well.
For sure.
Yeah. So, Monster Hunter Wilds coming out on the PS5, Xbox, and PC. This is the first one that has cross play, not cross progression. Cross play. So pick your platform. I'm playing on PC. We're going to be playing a bunch more. We're going to get Nadia code. We're going to do a Monster Hunter Mondays hunt. Bring in some guests. We got a lot of people in our lives who are going to be playing Monster Hunter, and I'm very excited to max out my gear. Maybe I'll keep building up a great sword. That's been the other weapon that I've been playing with. And share your thoughts over on the Axe of the Blood God Discord. Okay, time now for a series of random encounters. Marvel Rivals publisher NetEase was hit by layoffs last week, including the Western team for Marvel Rivals. It's a big shakeup and casts into doubt a lot of what NetEase will be doing going forward. Wizards of the Coast has revealed its Final Fantasy Magic the Gathering collab with numerous cards. Tidus, Cloud, Terra, and Ishtala will be the main commanders. And we got all kinds of wild cards, including a Cactuar card that does 9,999 damage.
Of course it does.
Love that. Very funny. Like a Dragon, Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii is out now and has landed the series' second best start on Steam with a peak of 22,000 players over the weekend. Only Infinite Wealth has been higher. George R.R. Martin says there's been some talk about making an ER movie, not ER, the television show from the 1990s with George Clooney. That would be totally into that. That would be Elden Ring. But obviously his involvement is limited by needing to actually finish his book, which I have to say, I feel you, George R.R. Martin. I'm currently between jobs, and theoretically I have all the time in the world, except that I was staying up until 1:30 in the morning working on Axe of the Blood God merch last night. And I'm just too busy to write a book, which is ostensibly the reason that I'm currently independent, aside from working on my podcast. So solidarity. You take all the time you need to get done with Winds of Winter.
I got mine done. It's just in editing right now.
Congratulations. It really takes a lot of discipline.
I'm going to be the naysayer. Okay. Blog. Okay. Right, George. He is
blogging.
Blog.
He is blogging. He's blogging about the New York Jets.
Yeah, no, he needs to blog. Honestly, that is the most relatable thing, is like blogging about sports instead of doing your job. That is actually incredibly relatable. So you're right. I changed my mind again. Yeah.
A Pokemon Presents is set for February 27th at 6 a.m. Pacific, with the expectation that Pokemon Company International will properly reveal Pokemon ZA and a release date. Hopefully we'll get lots of new details on Pokemon TCG Pocket, including the next set. That would be really nice. It's a time again.
It's so soon.
I have not gotten an Infernape EX, and it's driving me crazy. I swear to God, I'm going to get that full color Infernape if it kills me. That is all.
It's a nice card. It's really nice.
It really is. Rest in peace to Peter Jason, who played Drill Sergeant Arch Dornan, among others, in Fallout 2. He was 80. And finally, happy 10th anniversary to Axe of the Blood God, an independent RPG podcast, which released its first episode on February 20th, 2015. The topic was, what is an RPG? I was joined by Jeremy Parrish and Bob Mackey, and we talked all about what we thought an RPG was. The next episode, we had Richard Garriott on, and then a couple episodes later, we were talking about this brand new game, Bloodborne, and wondering whether or not From Software could keep its momentum going. Spoiler alert, they could.
It did, yeah.
And it did. And then a couple months after that was our Witcher 3 discussion. So that just really grounds you in the time and the place. We were, I believe, we were just coming off the release of Destiny. We had Kirk Hamilton on talking about vanilla Destiny. Yeah, among others. So it really was a time. Nadia, your first episode was December 2015.
Wow. So I wasn't you weren't too far into it by the time you dragged me on. I
about a year.
Kind of wish that I had gotten to talk to Richard Garriott. He must have been fun to talk to.
I was at GDC 2015. He was working on his nonsense online RPG. Really interesting guy, by the way.
He's
Just-
gotta be.
I mean, at the time, he was like what in his 50s or 60s, but he's wearing all of this like fantasy, like necklaces and rings and everything. He's really good at talking himself up. Great salesperson. He'll tell you all about how he was the one who came up with the term avatar. Now everybody uses avatar, and this is how I came up with the term avatar. And
Isn't it a
this is why
religious term?
Ultima was so ahead of its time and stuff like
Isn't it,
that.
like from Hinduism, the term avatar.
I
thought it was. Okay, well,
And
you invented it.
He invented it, and we met in this huge open conference room in GDC, which was the worst possible place to record an episode. So the echoes were immaculate.
Real 2015
Everyone was
vintage.
booming. Yeah.
Final Fantasy 15 or big Final Fantasy 15. Although that's another thing. It's like, oh my god, Final Fantasy 15 demo. That was like one of the early episodes as well. Wow. Final Fantasy 15. What an amazing time. It was a dire time for Nintendo. The Wii U.
Right.
It was like arguably rock bottom in many ways. They were full on in the Wii U era. The 3DS was around. A great
It was
console.
doing all right. Yeah.
We were still a good year and a half away from the Nintendo Switch being revealed, in which Nadia and I eventually reacted to.
Yep.
And then the next year, when Nadia came on, and I was having such a great time with her, and we were vibing so well. I was like, I need a co-host. I can't do this all alone. And I asked her if she wanted to be my co-host, and so we started doing every episode together. And then that was when I was like, Nadia, you gotta play Persona 4. Okay, you gotta play it. This is your homework now. You gotta play Persona 4 Golden. And I tried to buy a PlayStation TV, and it was like $200 to ship it to Canada.
We had some random shit happen. It's just things happen to us sometimes. And we just let it roll. Okay.
But I made you play Persona 4 Golden and Final Fantasy 9, and you did reports on them for the podcast, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah. That was actually a fun time. That was my first time really going through Final Fantasy 9.
And not long after that, I believe we kicked off the top 25 RPGs of all time, which was, I think, our first really big success of the show. And we finished off the top 25 RPGs by recording from a closet.
Yep.
At PAX East.
Shout out to the closet.
Shout out. Based closet. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not allowed to say that anymore. Ugh. Everybody ruins everything.
I don't know what that word means anymore. I don't
even know what
it's good and it's bad. I have no idea.
It's good and it's bad. We love the closet, though.
The closet's always good.
Don't take that quote out of context.
Cat Bailey, I love the closet.
I love the closet. And I gave Nadia a copy of Trails of Cold Steel and was like, you have to play this.
I got it.
It's your homework. I think I had a collector's edition of Valkyria Chronicles 4 used as the bottom of my mic.
No, that was Tales of Cold Steel. Trails of Cold Steel. We had the special edition.
Okay.
And I took it home.
Well, what a time to be alive. And then we continued on to the console RPG Quest.
I liked that. That's probably one of my favorites. Like,
it was a good time.
It was a good time. Yeah.
The ColecoVision or something had like a tape that like you plugged into a Walkman. It was just some ridiculous stuff they did back then. Tapes.
I asked some of the folks from the Discord what their favorite moments were, and not surprisingly, the console RPG Quest in the top 25 comes up pretty consistently. It's a hard thing to match. Vessel said, my favorite part of the show is just the hosts in general and all the in-depth industry knowledge and experience they have. From hearing wild gaming journalism stories from Kat to obscure internet shitposting history from Eric and the deepest, darkest pits of Nadia's sunless Canadian childhood.
I had some fun. Come on.
Also, Victor just popping in from the edit bay. Bring that man on more. I told him he had to be on the 500th episode. That was the law. And Justice said he really enjoyed the Bloodborne Pantheon month, which admittedly
Nice.
was
Good.
like one of my
Yeah.
faves too. When I committed to beating Bloodborne in a month, and I did it just in time for the podcast, and I was having all that help from the Discord. It was a real community building moment. I had a great time, but and then of course we launched the Patreon 5 years ago, and I remember late 2020 being like, what if we launch the Patreon and nobody cares? What if we make like $100 a month off this thing? Or so, what's gonna happen? Also, I had to go to US Gamer and say, hey, Gamer Network, can we have the name? Can we keep the brand? You don't want it. You don't want Axe of the Blood God. You're not gonna do anything with it. And they said, graciously, they said yes, which is more than a lot of companies would say. A lot of companies will protect their IP until they die, and then we would have called it like Sword of the Blood God or something. I don't know, but
I think we were talking about bringing back Active Time Babel,
Yeah.
oh yeah, we would have just renamed it Active Time Babel again.
which is a great name too. But yeah, it was
an incredible
actually
name. Yeah,
quite sporting of them to give us our brand back, because in these days, a lot of places would purge everything and say, by the way, you're fired. And that would be it.
I mean, there are very real examples right now of places that
Exactly.
still like kept the IP and the idea of something. Waypoint being a pretty notable example, even though the people who made Waypoint and conceived of Waypoint and created the spirit of Waypoint are long gone from said company. So I'm glad that Axe of the Blood God and even US Gamer, which I mean US Gamer doesn't exist anymore, which kind of sucks, but at least it's also not like a zombie of its former self either. So, you know, we can take some respite in that.
yeah, it could be a lot worse.
Too cool to try to
Oh
revive.
god, could be revived. Some tech bro turns into a zombie.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, look at my
US Gamer would have
no-cap
long
Riz.
since become a weird content farm if it still
Yeah.
existed.
Roblox guides. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Dressed to impress codes.
wow, Roblox codes, cool.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of glad that in a way it went out on top. It went out when it was still good, and when things are good, it's still good and fair in this world. I say in the middle of
Some
a
of my best
pandemic.
writing was in those last 6 months where we just said, screw it. What's the point? We
Yeah,
just
no
wrote what we
holds
wanted
barred.
and just
That
wrote
was-
some great essays.
That was when you lobbed that 114 blog at me like right before I went on vacation. That was crazy.
So good. Nadia, you can't do this to me. Final Fantasy
Yeah.
14 is horny,
Yeah.
and I support it.
US Gamer would have long since. I think the spirit of US Gamer lives on in Axe of the Blood God.
Absolutely.
Also, Katie. Rest in peace, Katie.
Oh my god, she's not dead, is she?
No, she's not
No.
dead. No.
No, she's making way more money than any of us over at Apple.
The industry did not
unable
deserve her.
unable
She's
to
living
appear
her
on
best
pod.
life. She just seems really happy all the time, and
Good for
I
her.
say, good job, Katie. Keep it up.
She was way.
You just keep
she did
enjoying
not belong.
video games.
Yeah. Sometimes just get someone like that, like Reb. I think just this industry doesn't deserve her. I'm so mad at this industry. I'm just gonna sit here and pout.
I mean, everybody from the USG days has pretty much gone on to bigger and better things. I mean, not to say that USG was not a big and good thing, but like nobody is really like quietly disappeared into the sunset, which has been nice to see.
The long dark night.
We used to do oneup.com reunions, and I have some pictures of all of us, and I'm like, went to PlayStation, went to Riot, literally directed Destiny, literally directed Spider-Man 2, went over to Limited Run Games, etc., etc., etc. And then you look at me, and I'm like, still here, still talking about video
Made
games.
Axe of the Blood God, please.
Made
Kat.
Axe of the Blood God. It's like Animal
Honestly,
House.
I feel like, you know, I kind of had a meandering path through my 20s and part of my 30s, but eventually what I'm coming to discover now is that people need other people to talk about the history of games, because it is such a mess that, and a lot of people who were in the industry and were doing that and like, you know, writing and whatnot, yes, some of them have moved on, and a lot of them have just dropped out of the industry altogether because there's no history here. There's no way to preserve any history because everyone gets burned out by the time they're 30. So I have no kids. I have, thankfully, like healthcare through the government, so I don't need to attach myself to a job. Therefore, I had the freedom to freelance, and I finally came out here, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm not completely useless after all. I have a wealth of knowledge is actually quite useful.
If I were to ever do a separate project, so one of the things I'm grateful for is that EGM did a Kickstarter where they did a huge tribute book. They're doing a huge tribute book to EGM,
Yes,
going back through its entire history. It's like games history through the lens of EGM. And they got all the old people back, and I know a lot of them, to record podcasts and videos and talk about the history of the magazine and everything, which I think continued until 2014 before maybe becoming a Walmart magazine. I think the initial run of Walmart magazine. And I appreciate that exists because there's not enough game journalism history out there. We have Nintendo Power histories here and there, but a lot of video game websites have come and gone over the years. Giant Bomb has changed a lot. OneUp.com is long gone. IGN is gone. GameSpot, sorry to say, is a shadow of its former self. And the ones that do still exist have changed a lot over the years. And game journalism has gone through a lot of different iterations. And if there's one thing that I would like to do is find a way to catalog that history, because I'm very passionate about it, actually, because I love media.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I'd love to help you with that.
So much of it gets wiped. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Like, speaking from personal experience, having been at Destructoid and watched the C blogs get slowly eradicated over time, until the point where they just said, no, we're just gonna wipe them all. Y'all have like a week to get whatever you want off the archives, and that's it. It was a bummer to see, because that's, for every, lengthy forum shitpost that happens, there's stuff in there that's pretty darn good. There's stuff in there that was the start for a lot of people. A lot of people started out C blogging and then became actual games writers. That was actually a through line for a lot of folks early on, was to get involved in those community scenes and eventually rise up through the ranks and get their start. I was actually talking to someone at a press event over the last week who they got their first opportunity just because they wrote a long rant about Dark Souls somewhere, and somebody read it and was like, hey, this is pretty good. You want to write for us? And I think that's increasingly rare, because number one, the online apparatus doesn't want that sort of writing. It doesn't want personality. It just wants,
it doesn't.
It wants churn.
The way to get in now is to just do guides, just grind guides.
Or make YouTubes. Just even YouTube is kind of rough right now. So I don't know, make YouTube shorts, make reels, TikToks.
I don't know how you get in, honestly, but sorry to say. I wish that the landscape around games media and the conversation around games media weren't so fraught, but it'd be really fun to do a podcast where I literally just bring in old game journalism people and share war stories from the last 40 years worth of games media, because it is really a rich history from the 80s, 90s, and today. I think one of the first games media and gaming magazines is actually founded by a woman, for example. Very cool. But Axe of the Blood God, long may it continue. Raise a glass. Here's a toast. And we'll be doing 500 episodes. We'll be doing our 500th episode next week. We'll have Victor on. It'll be a real big party. It will be a lot of fun. Let's talk about some of the other things that have been happening in the industry, starting with the Final Fantasy Magic: The Gathering reveals. I saw a pretty funny reel the other day about like what the Worlds Beyond is doing to Magic: The Gathering right now. They said, here's what Magic: The Gathering Worlds Beyond will look like in 10 years. And it's like, I play Godzilla. Well, I play Tidus. And also, I play a special enchantment where I play my Spotify reel of Kendrick Lamar. And
it's the Sage Rake spell. Yeah. It's just his face.
And that's really where we're getting to. The Fortnitification of everything, which it's just that's the modern media landscape, I guess. But in the short term, I'm really excited about the Final Fantasy set. I'm kind of going all in. I wanted to try and pre-order the Cloud set, but it was out of stock, or it wouldn't take my credit card on Amazon, and I guess I missed my window. So maybe I'll get Terra instead. Eric, are you getting the Tidus set?
You know, I got Titus and Ishtola on lock. I got those as fast as I could.
Man.
A lot of people were really into Ishtola.
She's very popular. She's cat mom.
Historically have been into Ishtola. That is accurate to say.
Especially Night Ishtola.
I was a little concerned, or not concerned. I was a little curious why they went with Cloud, to be honest. I mean, I know Cloud's the poster boy of FF7, right? Like he's the protagonist. But
it's because of remake and rebirth.
Yeah,
every one of these is like carefully calculated to appeal to a different demographic. Terra's the avatar of the OGs.
That's Cloud for everybody who needs to take their ibuprofen right now. Rebirth. Yeah.
Ishtola is for the 14 nerds.
Mm-hmm.
And Tidus is for aging millennials.
Yeah, me.
Yeah, but like,
I do think Cloud is a weird play for I don't know. I kind of wish it had been Tifa, I guess is what I'm saying. Like Tifa would have been a pretty fun character to put front and center, whereas I talked to some Magic folks. So John Carson, who was on the show last week, was at MagicCon, and we talked a little bit about what each of the archetypes in these decks kind of represent. I pulled the Cloud card up because apparently equipment and equipment decks are a pretty popular archetype, especially for newer players. And so that being the FF7 deck, it'll probably appeal to a lot of people who are just getting into Magic and want something that's easy to understand and to play with, whereas probably something like Ishtola or even Tidus was the one that people... I'm saying Tidus as often as I can right now because Ken Shepard won't let me say Tidus. He makes me say Tidus every time we talk about it.
Is it Tidus or Tidus?
It's technically
Tidus. They say Tidus in FF10.
It's well, they don't say it in FF10, crucially, because Tidus's name is never spoken in FF10 because you can rename Tidus, and so they can't ever say his name. But I think in the additional materials they call him Tidus, but it looks like Tide and the whole theme is water, so I always say Tidus. But then Ken Shepard literally would not let us continue the podcast until I started saying Tidus, so there we are. I think that one's probably a little bit harder to play conceptually because it's all about bouncing counters around, and you have to kind of like get a really good startup and like get your engine going faster. The one I really like, I think I've got it pulled up here. Yeah, Emmett Selk is a really good card. It's one where the art is fantastic, the theming is fantastic, the color choice is fantastic, and then the text at the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 14 or more cards in your graveyard, you may transform Emmett Selk. Everybody who has played Shadowbringers is going through it when they read that text. That is that's beautiful.
Very good use of
Chef
story.
Kiss. Yes.
Yeah, and implemented as a gameplay.
Yeah.
Clever.
I think the
they really have a lot
exciting.
of the designers have a lot of fun with turning the stories from these characters into gameplay mechanics, I have to say.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this. It also makes me really excited for the now officially confirmed Avatar set further out down the road.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Oh my god. Which, by the way, there's a new Avatar show happening.
I mean, if we want to do another topic, we can talk about all the reasons why I'm really not excited for that Avatar show.
Sounds like a good post.
Why aren't you excited?
Okay, hold on. Let me take the FF cards off the screen real quick. I said this on Blue Sky. I watched Korra as it aired, and I remember all the ways in which Nickelodeon specifically caused problems for Korra. From
right.
randomly sending it onto streaming halfway through season 3, to all of the mucking about they did in the writer's room, to the infamous controversy over whether Korra and Asami, will they, won't they type stuff. I think a lot of And even I believe there were rumors and talk about how Korra was initially planned for one thing and then was changed later to have additional runtime added on, and that's why some of season 2 feels a little bit wonky. I think there are a lot of reasons why I just don't trust Nickelodeon to properly helm this. And also, having watched The Dragon Prince recently and things like that, I don't know that I worry about whether you can do Avatar nowadays, whether it hits the same, because I worry about playing the hits.
It's too woke.
No, it's that's not my problem. My problem is more like I think there is a version of this story that is easy to tell, and it's too easy to fall into the same story types over and over and over again. Like my thing with Dragon Prince is that
it seems very different though. I mean, they have an earthbender this time. It's more the Avatar is the enemy. It's almost post-apocalyptic. It really fits in the moods of the time, I have to say.
I'm curious about the direction they take that because of the way that Korra shifted the Avatar cycle. Because that was the whole big deal with Korra in season 3, I believe. Yeah. Is that the Avatar cycle is like changed forever after Korra. Which does not mean that there's no Avatar, but there is a different Avatar cycle. But apparently Aang is also going to play into this, so I'm really just curious how all of that goes. And it's hard for me to look at this and not be like, well, they're doing more Avatar because they know that Avatar is a brand that appeals to specifically my demographic. Like my age group loves Avatar. It's easily like a Harry Potter tier IP for my age group. Yeah. And that's it's hard to kind of separate that from like, okay, the marketing machine is whirring up and they need more to appeal to us. I'm hopeful that I'm proven wrong, but I'd also just lived through enough of Korra to not trust Nickelodeon.
Yeah, I know what you mean about the Dragon Prince. I feel like there is that kind of route that stories tend to go that make them easy to tell, and that's why I kind of get bored with a lot of cartoons that are made for today's audiences. But I'm like, yeah, they're for kids or younger people. They're just not for me. You absorb stories much differently, like when you're like in your 20s versus your 40s.
Dragon Prince introduces all the same earth and fire and elemental stuff that Avatar does, and even like adds more on top of it, and then uses so little of it, like uses incredibly little of it at the end of the day, because it's just kind of like set dressing in the background. And that's a little bit of what I'm concerned about, is that like this new Avatar cycle, this new series, like won't play with those ideas in interesting ways. But if they bring back some of the same talent, I mean, Studio Mir did incredible work on Korra, and I always love a good choreographed fight.
Korra
and so
was
that's
gorgeous.
That's what I'm really hoping for. That season 4, where they're doing some of the metal bending fights with Kuvira and all that. Oh my gosh, like incredible animation.
Oh my god. Yeah, we obviously talked a ton about Avatar. Eric made me watch all of it, and I have to say the OG, it's a little goofy at times, but it does very much hold up, especially as you get further into the show, and I'm really glad that I discovered it. So go check out our recaps of Avatar book 1, 2, and 3 over. It's exclusive for $5 patrons, and also we did Summer of Korra as well, which was a lot of fun. That was almost like a series of side stories that were very disparate in some ways, sort of loosely connected, but I really loved how they advanced the world in that one. So I'm sure we'll have plenty to say about this new Avatar show, which reminds me that, so we've set our next side quest. It's going to be video game related again. We're doing our PS2 draft. After this, I think the next side quest after this is we should all just pick an anime and like really go in on it.
All right.
And then maybe if we pick it early enough, we can watch a lot of it and have maybe do some watches with the Stars of Destiny and have convos, and then do a big watch. And the episode, the shows that I have in mind are Delicious in Dungeon.
That's a good one.
Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Ooh.
Gravity Falls.
Hell
Free
yeah.
Ren.
And then what's Free Ren?
You know, I swear, Cad Bailey, I've told you about Free Run so many times. It is about an immortal, not immortal, but like long-lived elf who the
Oh,
RPG
that.
adventure ends,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah. Free run. Let's watch
yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. Or
yeah,
Lodos Wars.
or Lodos Wars. If you want
Oh,
me to like
Lodos
have
Wars.
another episode, they don't put enough flashing lights warnings on those episodes because I went to
Yeah.
watch Lodos Wars recently and there was like no warning and it starts just blasting flashing lights at one point and I was like, this is really uncomfortable for me to watch.
The 90s loved its flashing lights.
Or we could have Nausica in there as well. We could do a Nausica watch, but or Ghibli, or like a multiple Ghibli watch.
Gear up, it's
My-
time for a Hunter X Summer.
Oh, God. I already played Dawn Trail. I don't need to watch the anime.
And I promise that we won't hijack the show for to recap every single episode like we did with Autumn of the Autumn of the Avatar and whatnot.
Hey,
Okay,
that worked
last
until
thing.
it didn't.
It worked until it's true. It's true. And lastly, just briefly, NetEase. It's fair to say that this was an earthquake for the games industry, and it does have some far-reaching implications. What we're kind of seeing is NetEase very suddenly and very dramatically shifting its priorities, where it seems it has been investing very heavily in overseas studios, putting a lot of money into independent startups from former developers. Nagoshi, formerly of the Yakuza series, for example, is under the NetEase umbrella. Grasshopper Manufacturers under the NetEase umbrella. I want to say that the folks who worked on Visions of Mana started a studio under them as well.
Uka,
Closed down.
yeah, they're now
Yeah.
closed.
Oof.
Yeah,
Is that fast?
they're gutted. Essentially, is what it was saying. I
Some
don't
of
know
it,
if it's
some of them
fully
went
shut
back
down,
to
but
Square, thankfully. But
Yeah.
yeah, just they completely decimated that studio, and the game wasn't even out, and they just closed it.
They just really yanked the rug out from a bunch of these studios that thought, oh, great, we're going to have a lot of support. And the story behind Marvel Rivals is really fascinating because, I mean, it was one of the big hits of last year. One of the handful of examples of an honest-to-God success story. And apparently they didn't really want it to be licensed. They didn't want to deal with Marvel. They were trying to come up with original characters. They even possibly considered canceling it at one point before it was even released, which things seems really wild in hindsight. And it just kind of is really emblematic of the current landscape of the video game industry, in which all of these studios get tons of funding for a little bit, and then all the investors get bored and change their mind because they are focused on something else, and then they can't get a second or third round of funding that they need to actually finish whatever project that they're working on, and then they end up shutting down before they even release anything.
I like
And all
the
we get is a bunch
arrogance.
of concept art and big promises.
Yeah, I like the arrogance that goes with like, oh, hey, we want this to be popular, but we want to use our own IP, as if the reason that it's popular isn't because it's Marvel characters. Like if you put like some Chicken McNobody anime chick in there, I don't know if anyone would care.
the funny part. So amid all of this, there was a big report that came out from Bloomberg that was detailing some of the behind the scenes chatter about the CEO behind all of this. And
Sounds like a bit of a bouncy dude.
there were allegations of him being a little flitty, of being, bouncing around, fickle, whatever you want to call it. Like we said, there was the stuff about wanting to use original designs over Marvel stuff, but also the notion that a lot of this was done because they're trying to compete with Tencent and BeHoYo. And it gives you a sense of scale for what we're talking about, because that is, when you look at, we talk about EA, we talk about Ubisoft, but then there is another scale on top of that that is Tencent, which has stake in just about everything. MiHoYo, which is a little bit smaller scale, but owns titans when it comes to the amount of revenue and reach that they have. And then NetEase is on that same scale, where they have, as we've been talking about, their fingers everywhere. They are involved in a lot of different development and have been scaling up that stuff. Now it seems like the move is a pull back from an international development scene to one that is probably primarily located out of China and partners and focuses on a smaller portfolio that tries to push for the most profit possible. And that's the weird thing, is you go like, oh, well, Marvel Rivals does super well, but it is also a Marvel game. And so it's that weird catch-22 of like, well, it could be more profitable if we owned everything that was there. And it's that weird brain rot that ends up creating really crazy decisions that almost result in the Marvel Rivals cancellation and things like that.
Yeah, we are in very uncertain times when it comes to international and global development. You just never know what politicians are going to wake up and want to do right now. So in a way, you can kind of understand why a lot of companies are wanting to keep things a lot closer to home and not outsource as much, because it's just going to get difficult. But it also leads to some wild stuff, like them just yanking the rug out from a whole studio in Seattle and saying, yeah, anyway, great job, everybody. Well, we're doing it all in-house. Small piece of good news. Blood of the Dawnwalker, that's the Vampire Witcher game that had a trailer a little while ago. It's made by a bunch of Witcher veterans. Apparently, that has no financial issues and it's progressing well. So that's one example of a game that doesn't seem to have been impacted. But last thing before we move on, the ID Xbox stream is happening right now, or did happen. There's an everything announced over on IGN. The main piece of RPG news is that Moonlighter 2 will arrive on Game Pass on day one. Did you ever play Moonlighter, Nadia? That seems like a very you game.
I did, but it just didn't hook me. I can't understand why.
It didn't?
Maybe 2 will be a better go.
It reminds me of Racketeer.
Yeah, Racketeer.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Racketeer.
Oh, that's a good game.
Good stuff. Not a lot of RPG news coming out of it, but I just wanted to highlight that one really quickly. Okay, that's it for the tavern. Nadia, take us home.
Actually got a last minute idea that was going around Blue Sky, and it kind of demonstrates how insane the human
doesn't involve
brain is.
Big Bird, does it?
No, but it does involve the color yellow. The Blue Sky was having a conversation about lunchboxes. Like, show me your vintage lunchboxes. And I had a lunchbox, and I had one in grade 1 that was, all I remembered about it for the longest time is that it was yellow, and it was rectangular, and it was plastic, and it had some kind of print on the front that I could not remember. I just saw like a muddled, okay, I think it's a nature scene. I kind of saw the colors there, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to look at eBay, see if I can find this thing. Who knows? And I put in the search terms, found it. And I knew exactly the one that it was, even though I didn't really remember the finer details. And the nature scene was actually the tortoise and the hare. Like, for some reason, I had a lunchbox where the tortoise was running past the hare and, beat the shit out of it in that foot race. And I always loved that lunchbox because I liked animals. And, it was like, had like the birds and the turtle and the rabbit. I think I advanced to a hand-me-down in grade 2, where my brother, he would have been in grade 4, so he's too cool for lunchboxes. I think he gave me his Transformers lunchbox, which was blue, and I remember that vividly, and I remember the decal was kind of worn out, and I'm like, I don't even like Transformers, why am I... Yeah, like, it opens, like... And the thing is, like, when I think about those lunchboxes, I can also smell them vividly. They had such a distinct plasticky smell that smelled like peanut butter sandwiches for years and just soaked into the plastic. And I never forgot it. I have like really strong olfactory senses for some useless reason.
Yeah.
And I can just recall that instantly. And that was such an interesting thread because, yeah, I have people like, sharing their lunchboxes and suddenly they remember. And I remember I wanted a licensed lunchbox so badly, but I think all other than like the Transformers hand-me-down, that's all I got. Eric, is there like you had lunchboxes, of course, right? Like they weren't too cool for millennials.
Not often, honestly.
Really?
I was more of a. I mean, so elementary school was probably the most I ever used a lunchbox. That was when I would sometimes take a lunch from home, but usually my parents just put money in my school account. You'd get whatever the school lunch was that day. That was a whole thing. And then by the time, I mean, middle school, I don't super remember how that one worked, but by high school, you had like a student ID that you would use as basically a credit card that you would
Oh my
swipe.
god, that is weird.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so you would get your lunch, and they'd have different lunch stations. So one would always have some sort of like Mexican food, one would always have pizza, one would have various fried foods, your chicken nuggets and stuff like
The
that.
fast foodification of school lunches.
And then one would be
Absolutely.
like the rotating whatever the daily special was or whatever. And then you would get your tray and then go to the checkout thing, and it would be like a food court in a mall, and you would just scan your swipe it like a credit card, and that would come out of your account. Now I did
sorry,
use
was
a
that
lunchbox
elementary
when I was
school?
in band though. When I was in band, I had to bring a lunch, so I did use it
That
for
makes
that.
sense.
Yeah.
I had a California raisins lunchbox that was
Yes.
bright yellow with a very fading label. My mom would make me peanut butter and jelly sandwiches on wheat bread, and I had little shark fruit snacks. And
I remember those.
yeah, they were pretty tasty. And I would have a box of chocolate milk. But when I was in high school, I had access to a car, so we would stop at Subway a lot and get lunch, and then we would go back to the band room and play Pokemon. There were some kids who were playing OG Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, it was around that time,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Yeah, because it happened in my high school
It was a
too.
good time.
It is interesting to me because when I was in high school, nobody could drive yet, or rather, nobody had their own car because everyone took the bus to school. There's the TTC. When I was in middle school, and this is interesting, Canada for some reason does not have a national lunch program. So if I wanted anything to eat at the cafeteria, it would be like, hey, give me a pizza pop, which is like a little calzone thingy, kind of classic.
Oh, okay.
Canadian
That was a lot better
cuisine.
than what I thought it was going to be. Okay.
And of course, we had poutine so we had people eating
I assume
poutine
that's
every day.
everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. But my husband tells me about his high school, and it's like, oh, we had, like, as you said, Eric, kind of more food court structure, vending machines everywhere, and it's like we
Yes,
had one
yeah.
vending machine, and it had like one for pop and one for like snacks, and I'm like picturing vending machines everywhere in a school. That is so odd.
So we had a couple vending machines that were in a very specific place, but we also had the school store that was open during lunch. So, okay. This tells you how big my high school was. We had the food court area, and then kind of tucked around the back was this like other place where they sold like desserts and stuff like that. And so they had like the zebra cakes and any of the
I love
hostess
zebra cakes.
stuff. But
Yeah.
then they'd also put out like kind of like cakes and ice cream and things like that. And you could spend extra money to get those. Or out in the courtyard, there was a school store that I think was explicitly run to fundraise for different club activities and stuff like that. So different clubs would host it, and they would sell stuff like airheads. So you could like pay a quarter to get an airhead or something like that. And that was also pretty popular. But there were vending machines in some areas, I think mostly near like the gyms and stuff, because then people coming in for the games and stuff would usually get stuff there too. And I hated them because a bunch of them stocked corn nuts. And
Oh,
I
corns are nasty.
hate corn nuts.
Gross.
Oh,
They smell
I don't blame you.
disgusting. I don't know how anybody.
Gross.
I've never even tasted one because every time I smell it, I immediately want it out.
I want it gagged.
I want it gone. Yeah.
I had them once.
Corn nuts are
I don't,
evil.
even, I don't even know if they're still around. I mean, they must be, but I
They
don't
need
think
to
I
be
see them on the
stopped.
shelves. They need to be. What about candy corn?
Stop
Candy
corn nuts.
corn's fine.
We have
I-
an anti-corn nuts agenda here on Axe of the Blood God.
I don't love candy
This
corn, but I think
episode
people
sponsored by
overblow it.
corn nuts.
Look, if they want to sponsor us, I'll shit talk them while they give us money, I guess. I don't know.
I'll be like
If you're into
Krusty the
that.
Clown eating the hamburger on air, and spitting it out as soon as the cameras are off. Blah, I think it got in my mouth. I'll pour
Yeah.
some whiskey.
I know I had a very different high school experience than probably even most US folks, because like Texas high schools are so big. They're gigantic.
Yeah, they're
They
like
are
malls.
they're small cities in and of themselves. And that's a weird thing to grow up around. And so every time I talk to people who went to private schools, I mean, there was a private school across the road from us that some of my friends went to that was like one of the Christian private schools. And their experience was completely different from my high school experience. And it was always weird to talk to them, to be like, oh yeah, I did all this. I was like, what'd you do? And they're like, well, our class of like 6 people just prayed for half the day. And I was like, that's crazy.
That sounds great. Sign me up.
Yeah, my class was 700 people, and my
Oh my
partner
God.
went to a small Catholic school where her graduating class was probably less than 100, and she knew everybody, which honestly I think is a better setup
like
if you can
Toronto
manage it.
just has smaller schools. Like our next high
Yeah.
school is just like down the street and all that. Just the way it's spaced out just makes sense.
I like the
Well,
crowd.
alas,
I
my
don't know.
neighborhood, all the kids moved away, so now all the schools are
Aw.
closing. So
Yeah.
no more big schools anymore.
One of the schools I went to was closed because there was one right across the street from it, and it makes me sad.
They've opened like 2 more high schools here. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's
Texans
because
do
everybody's
making
moving to
babies.
Texas for some
Yeah,
reason.
everybody's moving to Texas right now.
Well, good luck with that. And that's it for this episode of Axe of the Blood God. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for your generous support. Next week, the 500th episode of Axe of the Blood God. Incredible. Please stay tuned for more information. If you are Star of Destiny, shop.bloodgodpod.com. Stay tuned. Just go check the Stars of Destiny chat. You'll find lots of links to the merch, and stay tuned for a post that has info on how to get your discount and how to get access to everything, and all of the merch will be available in a week. It's really cool. I can't wait for it. It's really great. I love this merch, and maybe we'll do some more of it real soon, but go check that out. We are now heading into the Axe of the Blood God post show with the Stars of Destiny. Come on over to the Discord. Come hang out with us while we talk about various things that, like maybe more Monster Hunter and such. It's going to be a good time. Until then, in the meantime, I've been your host, Kat Bailey. Thank you so much for listening. And for Eric, Nadia, and myself, see you next week, and happy adventuring.